Hi, this is John Adams, and this is part 2 of Dressing Max. So where we left off last time, we had Max's boots selected and placed in the canvas, and what I did is I separated the two boots by selecting one and then copying it or cutting it and then pasting it. So now I have two different boots. I rotated this one to make it fit better. So one of the other things that you can do too is when you have a selection, and we didn't discuss this before, but you can go into, I'm going to go ahead and move my recording window up a little bit higher because now you can see a little bit better, because when we have a selection, when we first create a selection, you will have this option of refine edge. So notice I had to go to one of the selection tools in here to see this refine edge. You can't see it with the move tool, you can't see it with the crop tool or any of these other tools, but it has to be a selection tool. So when you have the refine edge visible after you've made your selection, you can click on refine edge, and what refine edge will do is it will show you an image of your actual selection, and it'll show it on different backgrounds. So you have a choice. If you want to see it on white, you can see it on black, you can see it on an overlay, you can see it with the marching ants, however you want to see it. For this demonstration, I want to go ahead and use black, and then I'm going to click away and it'll keep this here. So what we can do is you can use the smart radius on this and adjust this, and you can see it makes a much better selection. It's getting rid of some of the white area. Now, like I said, this is a very low resolution image, so that's why the white is showing in there, but you may want to go ahead and feather it just slightly. Now the feather is kind of fighting with the smart radius that we've created, but you can smooth this out a little bit. Now this is a little exaggerated because the fact that this is low resolution, so you can create more contrast in here or less contrast. It looked better before. You can shift the edge, you can shift it in, or you can shift it out, and you see as you move it out you'll get more white. So I'm going to get rid of some of this white area, leave a little bit, and then I'll go ahead and say OK. So if we have this, when we created this, we have it set to selection. There's other settings on here. This is the default selection. So it'll go back to the selection. That's what we want to do for this project. Now what it did is it got rid of some of this edge of the boot. So for this we'll go ahead and leave it, just because I want to show you how this works, because what it does is it pulls in on your selection slightly and it gets rid of some of those areas, but it also feathers the edge slightly too. So now when I go under edit, copy, and then I go to max and then paste, now you will see it a little bit better. Now you won't see all the handle like I got before, but the handle's all white anyway. So but the selection's a little bit better. You can see it's not as rough on the edges, it's a little bit smoother, it's not as white, there's not all the excess white seen here as you have in here, so it's a better selection. But one of the other things we can do, and I'll go back, I'm going to get rid of this one that we just pasted, and one of the other things we can do is on the actual selection of the boots, we can go ahead and go back to where we were with the history on this, and make sure I have history showing. I want to go here. Okay, so I copied actually instead of cut, so that was probably what the problem was. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint this in, which is going to look a little funny, but that way you can get a better image itself. So you can go back in here. I'm going to deselect this actually, and then I'm going to go ahead and select it again. Now this time I'm going to go ahead and use the quick selection tool. Go. It took a little while to be able to get it. So see how you can drag across your image and get a pretty quick selection, and then you can zoom in you can select another part of the area. Okay, and that's not bad. I still have some white area in here, but I'm going to go ahead and paint some of this in. So I'm going to go ahead and use the paintbrush. And when I pick the paintbrush, you can make the size a lot smaller, but you can also pick the color. So you can either go to the eyedropper over here and pick a specific color, or you can go into the foreground color box and just select that. It selects the dialog box shows up, and in here when it shows up, if you move your cursor out from the dialog box, instead of picking a color in here, just move your cursor out and turns into the eyedropper, and then you can pick a color. So I'm going to pick this dark color. I'm going to say OK. So now I have the dark color picked. I want my brush to be smaller, and I also want it to be, instead of being a soft edge, I just right clicked on the desktop. I don't want it to be a soft edge brush. I want it to be a hard round brush. And then I'm going to make my my brush small. So I'm going to go in here, and I should be able to, let's go ahead and deselect this, and I want to go in here and paint. So I have my opacity set really low from another demonstration, so I'm going to go ahead and set this up, and you can see I can paint in here this color. Of course, you wouldn't want to do this unless you really needed the straps on here. I'm kind of exaggerating this a little bit, and you don't necessarily need to do this for this demonstration, but I kind of wanted to show you how that works. So if you want to paint in those straps, you can do that. We're going to use the paintbrush for other things later also, so it kind of gives you a better idea. So now when I go back to my selection tool and I make my selection, it's going to select it a lot cleaner, and I ended up selecting the whole background rather than the actual area itself, so you can see. And then I'm going to deselect. I'm going to use the lasso tool to deselect a little bit on here. So I'm going to hold the Option key down. I'm going to zoom in using the Option scroll wheel to zoom in. I'm going to get rid of some of this white area in here that was selected just by going around, holding the Option key down. To go to minus, you see the minus in here. I'm going to leave the add to because I want to add to this selection. I want to subtract this part in here, the white area, and this still won't be perfect, but it will be better than it was. I'm going to subtract this white area here. Now you can do this with the magic wand too, but it doesn't always work as well. Like I said, with low resolution images, if this was a higher resolution image, this would work really well with the selection tool. And then I'm going to, or the magic wand tool. So I'm going to go ahead and refine edge on this, and then you can see the Smart Refine. And if you move this over, you can see a little bit better. I'll zoom out on it. You can still zoom when you're using Refine Edge, so you can see what you've got in here. I'm going to go ahead and say OK. I'm not going to feather and do all this that we normally would do. I'll just go ahead and say OK, and then I want to go in here and say copy. Okay, notice it didn't cut like I did last time. The reason it turned black is because when I cut, the background layer is set to black, and it will make everything black when you do that. So I'm going to go back to Max. I'm going to make sure my layers are open. I'm going to get rid of these two boots because I'm going to have the new one instead. And then I'm going to go ahead and say paste. And there's the two new boots. A little bit better. It's not perfect, but you see the handle's better now. I'm going to place this one as close as I can on the right foot. And then I'm going to go ahead and use the rectangular marquee tool. And I'm going to select that one boot. I'm going to go under Edit, Cut, Edit, Paste, go to the move tool, move this over, rotate it slightly, and that's about as good as we want. Commit it by going up here. Okay, now we have two, so I'm going to call this L for left boot, and I'm going to call this other one, just click on it, call that, double click on it to get the name to show up in the layers, R boot. So I know I have a left boot and a right boot. So that's left boot, that's the right boot. Okay. Alright, so now I click away and it'll deselect that. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is go for the pants. We want to make a selection of the pants. So this is an easy one to select. I'm going to go ahead and close my layers, go up here, get a little closer. I'm going to use, I can use the quick selection tool. I can just click around. Now see how it doesn't get everything, and you might have to click around with this to get everything. And now I've got the background. Go under select, inverse, and I'm not going to refine the edge because I want to make this go pretty quickly. I'm going to go to copy. Now notice I copy, I don't cut. The reason I don't cut is because I don't want to get rid of this image in case I want to go back and redo it again. So I'm going to zoom out on this. You go ahead and edit, paste. There's his pants. Now this is something that will happen for you depending on what layer you're on when you go to paste. So what happened is it put the pants layer. I'll just call this pants by double clicking on it. Oops. Okay. And what happens is it just puts it below Max's actual photograph and actually below the floor. So if I pull this down, it would go behind the floor too. So it's just in the wrong place on the stack. All you need to do is pull it up and put it over the top of Max. And it may not go very well with his boots, so I'm going to turn his boots off for now. Those are just kind of temporary. And then I'm going to resize his pants. We'll zoom in a little bit, move it around. We'll move his pants around. A little smaller. That looks pretty good right there, actually. And then commit it. Now, if you don't want to commit it, you can resize it. You can, if you want to, you can pull this image down, and what it do is it'll stretch it. So if you want to stretch the pants down a little bit, you don't need to do that. So if you don't want to commit it, just go ahead and uncommit right here. Okay, and we're going to leave it at that. So he has boots on, but the boots really don't go with the pants. But what we can do is we can put the pants over the top of the boots, and it will, if we want to have all those together. So now we can have his boots on and his pants on at the same time, and his hat also. Okay, so now we have all those things. So the next thing we need to go to is the shirt. So in the shirt, the last thing we're going to go to is the cat. Okay, on the shirt, this is a little bit more complicated demonstration of selection, and in this one I'm going to use a different selection tool because of the fact that if we try to use the quick selection tool, we can select, but it's not going to work very good. It works okay, but because of the texture of the background, I'm going to go under select, deselect to deselect that and start over. So if we use the Magic Wand tool, it's even worse, because what happens is it selects, oh, that one actually worked pretty good, maybe because I lowered the sample area instead of point selection. If point selection will look more like this. So and then as you want to add to your selection, of course, if I go to the add to, you have to click on all those areas and it'll keep adding those. But if I go to the 3x3, I'm going to deselect first. I can select pretty good. So that's another option for you. But the reason I did this is I wanted to go to the magnetic selection or lasso tool, and I want to show you how this works. So right now it's set in frequency of 40, and if I zoom in a little bit more, you can see this better, but all you have to do is drag around your image, and what it does is it'll put anchors in there. Now the part that's not good is that we have some restrictions on here and it's not working very well. So if you get into this tool and you don't know how to stop working, you have to go all the way back to the very beginning. If you can't get to the beginning where it creates a circle, you're going to have to use the command key and just click once and it'll select everything that you've selected. So let's go ahead and deselect this, and I'm going to go ahead. You can see when I use the magic selection tool or magnetic selection tool that it's not going to put very many anchors on here, and there's very few, and that isn't really the way we want to work because of the fact that you're not going to get a good selection. But you can see it magnetically connects to the difference in color areas from the green and the gray, and it works pretty good, but it's not that great. So let's deselect, and then what I want to do is I want to increase the frequency. So if I increase the frequency to 100, which is a little bit more than what we need, but you can see as I click and drag, you can see it creates more anchors, additional anchors, and we can go in here and do this pretty quickly. And it'll be a better selection because of the more anchors on the frequency. Okay, that's pretty good selection, but it's not great. It needs some cleaning up. So you can see the reason I did this is because it needs cleanup. Now if we did use the magic wand like we did earlier, you wouldn't need to clean it up as much, but I do want to show you how to clean up in case you need to do that. So lasso tool, we're in the add to. I'm going to use the option key and see how it makes the minus on there. I'm going to go minus. Okay, minus here. This. And I'm going to get as close as I can. So sometimes you can make modifications that are pretty good, that are necessary for your selection using the lasso tool. It works pretty good. You can see as I get closer, I'm going to go around. It's going to zoom in on this area. We use the space bar to get the hand tool and then move around because we're zoomed in. Go back to holding the option key down to get the minus. I want to get rid of a lot of this green in here and the excess, and maybe a little bit here too. Using the space bar again, you can move around, and there's some green there too. Okay, for now that's pretty good. So as good as we're going to get on something similar to this. So you can see the selection. So then I'm going to go into the refine edge, and this is where you can see all the green. So if we use the smart radius, that will clean it up pretty darn good. And then we want to smooth, or we want to feather slightly. So the feather gave it a little bit more of a green area. So let's go ahead and shift the edge slightly. We want a little contrast in there. Okay. See, now that was a good selection, and we don't really see any green in here. So we're going to go ahead and say OK, and it's on a black background. You can shift this to a white background if you want to see what that looks like. But let's go ahead and say OK. Now it doesn't do anything. It just changes the selection until you copy and paste. So it has to be copied, and then you have to go to Max's photo, and we're going to go ahead and use Command V for paste. Use the move tool. We're going to move it over Max, and actually that looks pretty good already. And we may want to make it a little bit bigger. Let's take a look at without the pants. Yeah, could go maybe a little bigger, just slightly. Okay, and then we commit it up here. Look away from it, that looks pretty darn good. So the next thing we want to do is we want to go to the blazer. So we minimize that, we deselect the shirt, and we're going to try the same thing, but this time we're going to go ahead and use the magic wand and make sure that we have it in that 3x3 average area, okay, which I got a really good selection. I don't want this area, so I'm going to go use the option key. I don't need to go to the minus. I want to make sure that I hold the option key down, and I want to deselect this area. But another way of doing this is using your lasso tool. It didn't work good with the magic wand tool, but what I can do is go ahead and use the lasso tool, hold the option key down, and select all this area that I don't really want the shirt. And you know what, I made a mistake on here because I was selecting the background. So let's go ahead and inverse first. I wasn't really thinking about it. I didn't see the marching ants out to the side. Now I want to go ahead and I can use either the lasso tool with the option key and just drag around the area that I don't want to select. You notice it's in the minus, and now it'll work properly. So now I deselected the Hawaiian shirt. So now I have this selected. I want to go to Refine Edge here. I'm going to go ahead and move the dialog box over here. We'll set it to Smart Edge. Put it here. Just move it over slightly. Let's take a look at it on a black background. You can see the green better on the black background. So if I move this over, but you remember I still want it to feather slightly, and I want to shift the edge. So there we go. That looks pretty good. Make sure that I don't get this too fuzzy looking, but for right now it looks really pretty good. We'll say OK. Okay, and then I want to go ahead under Edit. I'm going to go ahead and copy. Oops, I slipped. Copy. We're going to go to Max, and then we're going to turn the shirt off. Shirt layer. Now I forgot to name it. Shirt. Just by double clicking on the layer I can name it, and then I'm going to turn it off. And then because I'm on this layer, when I go to paste now, it'll put the jacket above this. So I can go Edit, Paste. There's the sports coat. I'll just call this jacket. Okay, and then we're going to move it around, and it just needs to be a little bit bigger. Try to get it to fit pretty good. You can use your arrow keys to move things over and up. And his sleeves are pretty short, so I'm going to pull this down a little bit so it looks like it fits him better. And use the arrow keys to move it around slightly. Okay, that doesn't look so bad. I'm going to go ahead and commit it. And that's Dressing Max, even though he doesn't look very beautiful because he's got a sport coat on and sweatpants and rubber boots and Canadian Mountie cap or hat on. Let's bring it over his ears. So if you wanted to, you can tilt the cap a little bit on his head, make him look more cool. Just make sure you commit it, and you can do other things to it if you want to. So the only thing we're missing now is the cat. So that's one thing I always let my students do is make the selection of the cat and figure out where they want to put it. So let's go ahead and select the background, go to Select Inverse, Refine Edge, look at the edge on it. Let's go to Smart Radius. Looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and feather it slightly. Shift edge slightly. Go ahead and say OK. We're going to go ahead and go Edit, Copy, go to Max, and we're going to zoom down. Make sure if I put it on now, it would go above the background. We want it to be above the floor, and it could go behind Max actually. So now if I go to this layer before I go to Paste, it will go in there, but go in there huge. Go into the image. So if I go to the Move tool, you'll see. Now if I zoom out on this, you'll see how big this photo of the cat actually is. So you can see it's a really high resolution image. And when you do this, you'll see, and then you can see your anchor points. So zooming out sometimes is a better thing to do when you see an image go in there that's gets positioned in there in a huge large setting, a lot larger than you want. So now we can move around. I'm using the space bar to move around. Now we can move the cat back here and make it a little smaller. Say, okay, I'm laying on the floor back behind Max, and that looks pretty good. And then we can zoom out and take a look. Command 0 will zoom out to fit to window. So that's our demonstration. You can see now that Max has been dressed pretty well, and he's got his cat and all that. We'll do some more refinements and selections later, but that gives you a pretty good demonstration. Alright, so that's the end of part 2 and the end of this demonstration for dressing Max, teaching you how to use selection tools, various selection tools, and refining the edge. Thanks.